Hey everyone, so we are starting Unit 2 and we are looking at the region of Mesopotamia. But we're going to focus today's lesson number 1 on the key characteristics of a civilization because that's where we kind of left off with Unit 1. We were looking at how these farming villages turned into civilizations. So it's really important to know what those are. So again, in the last unit, you learned about how the early humans went from being hunters and gatherers to farmers. And we saw how farming and agriculture changed everything, and it enabled or allowed people to settle in villages. So people no longer had to search for food. They no longer had to hunt for their food. They could live in these communities and help one another and get more of the resources that they need. And as more people are starting to live in these communities, these villages are going to grow and grow, and they're eventually going to become cities. And these cities are going to start to develop new cultures and ways of living. So over time, we're going to start to see how society and culture is going to grow more complex and how it's going to lead to the creation of civilizations. But what does that mean? What goes into making a civilization a civilization? So, the definition of a civilization is a complex society that has an advanced form of culture. So, in other words, this means that civilizations are just groups of people who've created some kind of advancement in their lives and how they do things. So, they're creating new processes and new inventions, new ways of doing things, and new ways of living. So, they're no longer just living to survive, they are living their lives more complex and with more opportunities than before. So there are many traits and many characteristics that go into making a society a civilization. These characteristics include a stable food supply, advanced cities, specialized workers, complex institutions, advanced technology, record keeping, and a developed culture. So we're going to learn about what each of these mean and then also kind of look at them through the lens of Mesopotamia because that is the area that we're focusing on right now. So the very first one is a stable food supply. And we saw this with the rise of agriculture and how farming allowed people to settle because they had that surplus in food. They had enough food to support all of the people who were living there. So the surplus of food is one of the key aspects of a civilization because it's very important to have enough food to support all the people who live in an area. So, in order to survive and in order to be a civilization, you have to have enough food to support everyone. Advanced cities is going to be our next characteristic. And civilization is closely linked to life in cities. And this is because cities started to grow up as farmers grouped together in order to farm together, store their food together, and trade what they were growing. And as more people are moving closer together, there's going to be an increase with the amount of workers who can work, amount of help that can be gotten, the resources that people could have, and the opportunities for work. So as cities are growing, they're going to begin to offer other advantages as well. So it's not just going to be about farming anymore. So this is one of the reasons why it's linked to civilizations, because we are having advancements. We are having other advantages to life before. So for example, cities like some in the area of Sumer, which is a area within Mesopotamia, they have large temples where people could go to pray. So cities are going to start to offer things that are not just about farming and work. They are going to start offering things like for religious purposes. But they're also going to start to show an increase in many different types of work that are not just about farming anymore. This really shows us some of those examples of how cities worked and how they started to be complex and really start to be advanced. Because as we can see in this bottom picture, even though it's a drawing, it is a representation of what these cities used to look like. And up here is an example of some of the ruins. this really shows how advanced these cities were and how many people they could support and how it was no longer just about farming. So, another characteristic is going to be specialized work. And we saw in the last unit how people could start to specialize because of the food surplus allowing other people to do work that was not just farming. So workers could specialize, which means to do a job that requires special skills and to focus on one skill to become a master at. So instead of having to do everything yourself in order to have all of the things you need, like food and water and shelter, clothing, and having to create all of those different aspects, people could just focus on one of those things. So, for example, a worker could just focus on building houses or just focus on making jewelry. They did not have to worry about doing all aspects because they could then trade with each other. So when people specialize, the quality of their work improves because they can really develop that skill because it's the only thing they have to focus on. And also the quality of the things that are made are going to improve because that's all that has to be focused on. You don't have to worry about making everything really quickly to have it. You can focus on making it the best that it possibly could. We're also going to start to see jobs starting to emerge that are going to be focused on leading the people and helping the people. So jobs focused on the government and religious. So we start to see different types of jobs emerge. Here's just a couple pictures that can help us understand. We have people who are even musicians. We have artists. We still have our farmers who were super important because they're the reason everybody had the food. And then we have people who could be religious leaders or government leaders. And we have people who are going to start to do other jobs that are kind of like scribes where they're writing or keeping records. Another characteristic is complex institutions. So over time, religion and government are going to become institutions. And an institution is a group of people who have a specific purpose. So these institutions are often going to exist to help society meet its needs. So we're going to start to see religious institutions and government institutions come into play. And these are actually very, very important to a civilization. And one of the key characteristics, because it shows that there are people who are going to be leaders within the societies and to help maintain order. So having an institution like a government is really important to a civilization. We're also going to start to see advanced technology. And just a reminder, technology does not necessarily have to be about things that are electronic like they are in our society. It's things that are going to make life easier. So societies are going to start to develop better ways to do things. They're going to create new tools and use new materials that make their lives a whole lot easier and allow them to carry out more tasks. So these types of things are all going to be advancements in technology because they are new creations that allow them to carry out more and make their lives easier. So for example, the Sumerians, again, we're looking at Sumer within Mesopotamia, they began to make tools out of bronze. So they were taking the copper and tin and using other types of materials to create their tools instead of just making them out of copper or just making them out of stone and things. They found a different way to make things and make their tools, which made them more reliable and made their lives a whole lot easier. Here are some examples of some of these advancements in technology that we're going to start to see within these early civilizations. But it's just like today, when we think about what a civilization is, they have some form of advancement in technology. And that's the same here. We start to see changes in how things are done and created, or brand new inventions that are going to be used to make their lives easier and better. Another important characteristic is record keeping. So societies have to keep track of many, many things, whether it's how many people live in an area or something as simple as trade records. Societies need to know what's going on. And during this time, with the early civilizations, we're going to start to see records about things like food supplies stored in the city to make sure that there's enough food to support the people. And these types of records are really going to show that an area is a civilization because they are making sure they're keeping track of how things are working. Keeping records does not always involve writing. It usually does, but it's not 100% certain that it's true. But especially in the beginning, without the written types of writing systems and things, there were no ways to write and have written records. So, for example, in Mesopotamia, people were keeping records by using wooden counting sticks or stones and different things to keep track of where things were. And then later, we're going to see the invention of the world's first writing system. But we're going to start to see more and more growth in keeping track of records during these time periods. But again, societies having some kind of tracking system is a key thing to having a civilization. And the last one we're going to talk about is a developed culture. So, along with technologies that make life a whole lot easier, people are going to begin to start create things to add to their cultures. And we learned previously that cultures are a group's identity. So, it's their religions, it's their holidays, it is the foods that they eat, the languages they speak. And we're going to start to see people within these societies creating items to add to their culture and for enjoyment. So things were no longer made just solely about work or survival, but about enjoying life. And these are going to be things like different forms of art. So we're going to see new sculptures and paintings. This is a tapestry, so it's something that is woven with different fibers and fabric. We're going to see architecture being built that is not just for buildings for shelter. So we're going to see major religious buildings built or government buildings. We're going to see people creating music and musical instruments and literature. And once the written language comes along, this is also going to add to the culture. But this is a big part of a civilization because it's that advancement idea that people are no longer just doing things to survive, they are creating more to get more out of their life. So adding to their culture is key. So just to recap, the characteristics of a civilization include a stable food supply, so having enough food to support everybody, advanced cities that offer more than just farming options, specialized workers, having people focus on one specific job and having a multitude of job options, having complex institutions like governments and different religious groups or religions in general in order to help the people and help the society. We're going to see advancements in technology, so new creations to help life be better, a way to have records and keep records to know what's going on within the cities, and developed cultures that allow enjoyment out of life and not just things for work base. So, all of these things go into creating the idea of a civilization. And we can check all of these to make sure that an area is a civilization. And it's very important that we know these so when we do look at the civilizations that we learn about, we know that all of these aspects are going in and it really is showing that the people are developing and doing more with their lives than just what they were doing as farming villages.